Welcome to today's webinar, Patient Refunds, How to Overcome Disbursement Challenges. This is Rosalind Lewis, HFMA's Technical Analyst, and I will be moderating today's session. Now it is my pleasure to welcome today's speakers. Tony McGee is Senior Director of Market Management in OnBee's product organization. Tony has been in the payments industry for over 15 years. He is currently responsible for helping shape OnBee's strategic initiatives, maintaining a close eye on market direction, making sure OnBee stays ahead in the payment industry. Alan Gracie is Vice President, Sales and Partnerships at OnBee. Alan has over 25 years of experience in financial services, primarily focused on new sales production and sales leadership. With his CPA designation, Alan has leveraged his experience when working with customers over the years. Alan is a past board member of the local chapter of JDRF. And with that, Alan, I'll turn the presentation over to you.
Thank you, Rosalind. And hey, Tony, great to see you again, and glad we were able to be together. Good afternoon, everyone, and very excited about the opportunity to talk a little bit about patient refunds and specifically around the challenges in the payment space and some things to think about as you're kind of going through this process. Our agenda for today: first, we'll talk a little bit about consumer payment trends, what we have seen in the marketplace, as well as get some feedback from you all in what you're seeing out there in that space. The current state of patient refunds. We'll then talk a little bit about some advantages of moving away from a check and more towards a digital first patient refund experience. We'll wrap it up, and we'll leave a little time at the end to open up for questions, and we'll take it from there. As it is a part of this process, we will be putting out poll questions. And so here is our first poll question. Please tell us what area of work you focus on. First one is revenue cycle management, patient accounting, financial analysis, healthcare services provider, financial strategy, administration, or other.
Alan, I am definitely not in the financial analysis category. I can do that.
Us CPAs, we have to bond together.
Yes.
Okay, so we have the results up. So leading the pack,
category.
financial analysis. You must have called it there, Tony. Leading the pack. So 33%. Revenue cycle management,
25%.
Yeah.
Good.
Awesome.
All right.
That gives us an idea of who we have in the audience today. So again, thank you for letting us know that. So let's talk a little bit about what we see out in the marketplace. So Tony, let me ask you this question. Would you agree that over the last 20 years, even probably sooner than that, things have changed in how we either pay for things or how we get paid? And I'll put you on the spot. When was the last time you wrote a check?
I can't even remember the last time I wrote a check, actually, Alan. I was thinking about this when we were preparing, and it's been a while. There's a lot of dust on the checkbook here. The world's evolving rapidly when it comes to payments, more and more as we see as consumers every day. Over the last 15 to 20 years, it's changed dramatically, and I think as we think about the next the last couple of years, it's even more and more switching to a digital type of format, and I think people are writing less and less checks more than we realize. So it's been a while.
It's interesting. As a parent of an adult child, I had this realization I'd say about 3 or 4 months ago. I was getting him set up to move into his first apartment away from home. And believe it or not, the apartment building required a deposit only in the form of a check. They would not take a Venmo. They would not even take cash or an ACH. They needed that physical check. And so as I'm scrounging around, like you, scrounging around, blowing the dust off my checkbook and trying to fill it out, teachable moment for my child. And of course, he looked at me and said, "Dad, what's a check? I've never seen a check. I don't know what this is."
Yeah.
I have failed as a parent. So I'm giving a little bit of parental advice too on this on this webinar. But no, it's definitely something that as time has moved on, less and less about payment or paper and more about digital options, which we will talk about in a minute. So to that end, we have another poll question. Which payment methods does your organization use today? And you can select more than one if you'd like. Check, direct deposit or ACH, gift cards, prepaid cards, it could be virtual, physical, or reloadable, redemption or rewards card, cash or cash back to a card, mobile wallets. And then you see the whole list there of the different versions of mobile wallets, or something else. So we'll give a few seconds for you to respond to this poll question.
Alan, you mentioned your grown child. My daughter's 17, and she just about exclusively uses Venmo today. Barely wants to use a debit card or anything like that when she pays back friends, when she pays back, anybody really. She's using Venmo when she's interacting with her friends and that sort of a thing. So an interesting dynamic there as you, as the younger generation is coming up. So
absolutely. So no surprise on these results. In fact, I would put money on this one. That check was overwhelmingly going to be the highest response with over 85%. Wow. Interesting. I would be curious on the direct deposit versus ACH component. I imagine it's more so, which of course they're the same thing, one being more payroll versus the other, but that doesn't surprise me either on the ACH.
Interesting seeing the prepaid option up there as well.
Yes.
Good.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thank you for that. So based on these results and talking a little bit about the different payment modalities and what our options are. So what does this specifically mean for you, the audience member, within the healthcare space and specifically around healthcare payments? So first off, as you see on the screen, and we know this, as you just alluded to, Tony, is that customers now expect instant gratification. They expect reliability. They expect convenience during every interaction, especially as it says on the screen when you get your money. As we were preparing for this presentation, ironically enough, and I wrote this down, I actually had my own experience with a healthcare payment, a refund, where I made the payment, submitted it to the health insurance carrier, and they reimbursed me for it. And the date of service, just to give you a sense of the timeline, the date of service for this particular one was August the 10th. So I went to the doctor August the 10th, paid the bill then, submitted the bill. The check date was actually dated September the 13th. Okay. I received the physical check in the mail on September 23rd. So just thinking about the timeline of the number of weeks from August the 10th to September the 23rd. Now, some of you on the session may be thinking, wow, that's really timely, compared to my shop. But when you're talking about even a younger generation that says, hey, look, I made this payment, I'm now expecting a refund. So they want to have access to the funds, but not only the access to the funds, but they want to have the ability to access the funds anywhere at their time, to be able to have their choice and also know that it's secure. But one other thing that we have learned over time in this space is that the recipient also likes to have a personalized experience. And we'll talk about that in a minute, about what that means when you can personalize that to your recipient and how they receive that. Tony, anything else you'd like to call out on this page?
No, I think we see this across the board in our industry. I mentioned earlier that the payments landscape is changing incredibly rapidly right now. I would say between the tens and the 20, or the teens over the last 20 years. Things moved relatively slow, but over the last 3 or 4 years, it's really picking up in terms of adoption of digital type tools, right? And I think that's just really accelerating the process of that whole concept of immediacy. People are paying each other instantly, moving money between each other when they're buying and selling goods, when they're doing just daily interactions, right? And we're seeing that the consumer is now looking toward all of the different all the different areas where they spend or encounter different businesses, et cetera, trying to find ways to make that same experience across over into the business world as well. So we're seeing a huge acceleration in our industry in that particular category. The immediacy, the choice. There's more and more options out there today than ever before, and that's not going to slow down. So it's really accelerating.
It is, and it's interesting too when you talk about choice. That means means different things for different people, right? And so being able to receive that money when they want it, how they want it, and then how they want to pivot and be able to utilize those funds, I think is critical. And like we said a minute ago, it's all about that desire to remain and have a positive experience for your recipients. I think is very timely.
Absolutely. All right. So building on that, patient refunds, one of the topics today, have really not caught up with that digital age technology that we've talked about so far. While patient refunds are increasingly common, the overall experience has not yet caught up. The majority of patient refunds today are still sent by check. I think we saw a little bit of that in the survey poll questions that we had earlier. I think we had 85+%, not necessarily just refunds, but payments are made by check. As you can see on the screen here, got a couple of studies here that we looked at and kind of put some stats here for you to look at. One study indicated that 74% of patient refunds are sent by check today. Another study that sort of goes along with that indicated that 13% of consumers viewed checks as only 13% of consumers view checks as their main option when making healthcare payments. This suggests that they may not prefer to receive a check when a refund is due. And I think we see, as we've mentioned so far, checks continuing to dwindle in the consumer space. More and more studies are showing a declining usage of cash or checks in just everyday life. I think, honestly, if you look back 20+ years, I think there might have been some thoughts that by now we would have seen checks completely go away. There's still demand out there for it, but it is slowly going away as more and more options for those digital experiences become more and more prevalent. Consumers are moving away from using check-based payments and expect a refund experience to align with their preference for digital-first payments that are prevalent in other areas of their lives. Back to the previous slide, we talked about payment speed, we talked about choice, and honestly, convenience. So mobile devices are in front of us every day. We all have one. They're incredibly addictive. Everybody's using some sort of device and actually making transactions, looking at balances, looking at their bank accounts, looking at their credit card statements, etc. Wallets of all kinds are available on our mobile devices today, and that convenience. Why can't I just have it now? Is kind of the mindset right now in our industry, and consumers are really adopting that. Patient refunds come across all different categories. The patient's benefit information may not be up to date when it was initially captured. Maybe a staff collected too much based on an original estimate. A patient's coverage may have changed in the time between the healthcare encounter and the billing process. Errors in the billing process. The patient overpaid by mistake. All of these things lead to frustrations in not only the healthcare industry, but any industry, right? And waiting for a check, waiting for that administrative process to take place can create frustration. Maybe some of you have seen that in your own, daily lives, but that's more and more of a thing today, leading back to the immediacy and just making that experience a better experience. So that's kind of the industry trends. And again, not just in the healthcare space, but just across all the industries that payments touches. So something to think about there. And honestly, the growth of refunds in this particular space can be attributed to the ongoing practice of shifting costs to consumers, be deductibles and copays, a lot of administration, and honestly, digital experiences can help alleviate some of those pain points. So,
what's interesting too, Tony, is the fact that this is not restrictive to a particular demographic or an age-weighted type of scenario. I think there's some thoughts out there that, hey, it's just the younger generations want to embrace digital more than the older generation. And that were probably the case 10, 20 years ago, but not anymore. My 80-year-old father-in-law knows how to manage digital payments. He's a whiz around his smartphone. And so again, it just shows you that it's just an adaptation to what the consumer is expecting and wanting. And I think it's pretty even across the different sort of bands, if you will, sort of the age bands.
Yep. And these stats are accelerating. And that, going back to the point about, speeding up, being in the payments industry, last 15, 16 years, was pretty static for a while, pretty stagnant, for several years. And then honestly, really as the mobile adoption has kind of reached full saturation, the technology has just expanded rapidly. We see, new devices, new capabilities coming out all the time, new ways to communicate. Payments always goes right along with that. And it's just accelerating year over year. So we'll see these stats continue to morph quickly.
Great.
Okay. So just this slide here really goes into kind of the typical check-based, refund experience. And just wanted to kind of go through a few of the friction elements for payers and recipients. The patient's pain points really are, wrapped around, the long wait to receive those refunds or receive those funds, lack of choice, and, the fact that really the check is just the one option. There's no way to convert it to another type of solution. And, the additional waiting period to deposit that check before the funds can be spent can just create high costs for the patient, high, turn times, et cetera. Alan talked about this in, his example of the wait, and the process that it took. I mean, you've got the mail delivery time, you've got, all the different, friction points that we've already touched on. Take that on the other side, maybe your pain points are the high costs. Our estimates, and we see this across multiple industries, our estimates are a check, administering a check can cost anywhere between $3 and $12. We've actually seen some of our contacts tell us that it's more than that in some cases. If you add in, the administration piece, the lost and stolen stuff, the overhead associated with, the achievement of the funds on the back end of that check process, all of the different components that go into it can really add up. And, a digital solution, as you think about, evolving your business, a digital solution can definitely maybe contribute to some reduced costs. So those are some of the pain points. The delivery of the check, going through the mail stream, going through that process can take time. And then the servicing, right? So servicing the check, the constant questions that come in, et cetera, et cetera. I think consumers these days, again, going back to the main theme of what we're seeing in our industry, are looking for, an immediate solution. And, checks are slowly not making that a possibility. So there's always a missed opportunity to deliver a positive patient experience with a check, and moving to more of a digital solution gives those recipients the option to kind of have that immediacy and improve that experience. So, Alan, anything you want to add on there?
Tony, it's interesting. COVID, we learned a lot of things from COVID, right?
Yeah, we did.
And I think this issue alone really exposed probably what we already knew, but more so when you're talking about the patient experience versus, say, a vendor experience, right? A B2B payment. All they want is to get paid, and it's just a question of how fast you can get it done. When you're talking about a B2C or a business to consumer payment, and when you're still using a check from that component, it does really sort of reveal that experience from that recipient, and as you've said, along with the cost and so forth, it really kind of shows that. So with that,
the COVID experience accelerated a lot of things in that category, right? I almost wonder if that's not a lot of what we're seeing right now with the migration more and more toward a digital, the immediacy, the digital solutions, et cetera, because everybody had to sort of change their way of doing things because you couldn't get to the office, or you couldn't get, from point A to point B to continue writing those checks, or you had to sort of re-engineer your mindset to say, how could I do this through digital channels? And that alone has accelerated the process. It's a good point.
Absolutely. So it's now time for another poll question. So which, if any, aspects of your current payment operation would you be interested in offloading? So we've talked about current state today, and if you had the opportunity to offload which of these, and you can select more than one if you'd like. So option A is fulfillment of the digital payment choices, escheatment management, fraud monitoring, customer service related to lost checks or fraud. You'd like to offload the entire payment operation. You're just tired of it. You're not sure at this point, or the all-encompassing other. So we'll wait a few seconds for you to respond.
Surprising how big of a burden the escheatment management can be on the back end. That's an often overlooked piece of the process, isn't it?
It is. Just saying the word escheatment, I think, is a big challenge for some people.
Not an easy word to say.
Not at all. So we have our poll results. We might keep this up for a second. So the first one is interesting, the fulfillment of the digital payment choices. That surprised me a little bit. The ability to do that. So offloading that option, okay? Then what came in second? Oh, excuse me, not sure actually was number one. So that, see that there. And then we have fraud, customer service, kind of tied there.
Yeah, it's a big one. Lost checks, waiting for it to deliver. Right, replacing it.
Right. Interesting. Very interesting. What do you take on this, Tony? Seeing these answers.
I'm just seeing a lot of unsure. There's a lot of if you think about the fulfillment of digital payment choices. I think there's over half is not sure, but you look at it and you say, I think sounds like there's a lot of questions out there around how do I move towards something like this? How do I what do I have to do in order to, sort of move away from these experiences? The not sure was kind of surprising, but.
I see it as, a couple of things to me. Number one is usually not sure could be a couple of things. Number one, not sure from a customer perspective, like what does it mean for me to be able to do that? Do I have the ability to do it? Legally, can I do it? And then I think, and not to put words in anyone's mouth, but I would be curious, would my customers be willing to receive digital payments? And so
how much of a disruption to their, some uncertainty around making a change from kind of the same processes that have always been there.
Yep. Yeah. And then I wonder too, if it's just a question of inertia, right? This is what we've always done. It works. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. That kind of mindset. So interesting. Well,
totally understandable.
Thank you for that. So as we look to, this was a survey, or the results of a survey that we launched at OnBe earlier this year, called our Future Payment Survey. And what we did was we polled recipients and asked them what were the top requirements, if you will, and what you're looking for in the area of payments, and where you would see payments going, and what you desire. As you can see on the screen, really overwhelmingly, there were three things that were called out from this survey results. First off was that, as we've mentioned earlier, and you're going to hear it again, is that consumers prefer digital payments. They want it because they feel like, almost 2/3 feel that digital payments are more secure, that it can come right to me. It's not going through the mail system or some other method, that I can be able to receive it, and I can receive it quickly. They also, interestingly enough, 82% of our survey results said that consumers, that's a seamless refund experience influenced their decision to return to that service provider. Now, I thought that was interesting, right? When you think about patient refunds, for example, it's more so of trying to clear a balance out of a patient's account and let's get it to them. But consumers value that experience on the back end, because in some cases, as we've seen, these are significant dollars that are being sent to them. So being able to get them and be able to have it. So with a digital first payment refund option, you as the customer, or you as the provider, can offer your consumer faster access to their funds. You can give them choice of that payment method, which we've talked about earlier. It does allow you, when you use a virtual card or a bank transfer, it allows you to be a more greener, eco-friendly experience, getting rid of that paper. And then, as it says here on the screen, gives you those options that are much more flexible, including the ability for your consumer to provision that digital payment right to their smartphone wallet, Google Pay, Apple Pay, Samsung Pay. So again, these are results off of a survey that we conducted earlier in the year that you're able to access on social media if you'd like to get a copy of it as well. But I think it really does experience what we kind of thought, or at least tells us what we kind of thought. And so, Tony, anything you'd like to add to that?
No, you mentioned the just sort of the gratification and kind of the returning to that service provider for that, based on that experience. Not a healthcare example, but I had an insurance claim, an auto insurance claim, a couple of years back. And I remember thinking, when, the amount was given to me in terms of what was owed, okay, that's going to take a few weeks, couple of months type thing. I'm on the phone talking to the adjuster, and it was just, whenever, send the money via check and, to the mailbox, et cetera. And he, next statement is, okay, you're going to get an email shortly here, and you'll click on that email. It'll come from me. It'll come from, this insurance company, and you'll have a few choices when you open that envelope, right? And I thought to myself, I'm like, wow, this is different. This is not what I was expecting. So I get that email. I open up this, this link, and I see these choices, and it ranges from, yes, I could receive a check if I wanted to, but also I had an option to receive that payment instantly to my bank account by taking just a couple of steps, right? And then there were a couple of other choices I recall, and I remember thinking to myself, I know I'm in the payments industry, so I was kind of interested in what it was doing and kind of how it all worked, but I remember thinking to myself, this is different, this is unique. I think this isn't a company that's advanced, and I think I'm now going to remember this experience moving forward. And I think as more and more consumers see options like that, it can influence their decision to use a service provider, one over the other. And that's just one example, and that's something that I'll kind of never forget, I guess. Maybe not that monumental, but certainly an influencing factor for me.
Yeah, and definitely the combination of speed, choice, and convenience really can help sort of augment that experience and that customer engagement. That's for sure.
Absolutely. So, you might be, wondering, what a digital experience might look like. We wanted to give you an example from an OMBI perspective. One of the options that we look at with a digital first type, refund solution in the patient refunds world can eliminate these pain points of check-based payments, kind of checks the box of a digital solution, creates new opportunities for engaging recipients, checks all those boxes that we've talked about so far. But as you see on your screen here, you see a digital delivery of a payment right to their inbox, their email inbox. That patient can access a secure link, go through a few verification questions and kind of authenticate themselves. And right then and there, once they've gone through that process, they'll be presented with in this case, a MasterCard prepaid card. I saw prepaid as one of the, I think the third option selected in one of our poll questions. So I know some of you out there are familiar with this, with prepaid in general, but this is a virtual prepaid card delivered right to their device. Alan mentioned the ability to take that virtual prepaid card and add it to a mobile wallet on their phone, allowing for instant use in many, many retailers. I think the percentages now are really off the charts in terms of acceptance of a mobile wallet type of payment today. And honestly, you can take that payment and start using immediately in a variety of ways. This is just one option when it comes to delivering a digital first solution. There are many other ways that can be handled, but wanted to give the audience here an example of kind of what that looks and feels like. Again, checking the boxes of immediacy, that branding and engagement, and then just the flexibility of having the ability to start using that payment right away. Alan, anything else you want to add here?
So one of the things that I really like about this sort of experience when you have it on your phone, and again, we all have them and they're attached to us, and it's like our life is contained within that phone.
Yeah.
The second image is something that always speaks to me, is the fact that to have the ability to not only give them the payment mechanism at the top with the card, but also if there's any kind of, in the industry we call it spend back or win back, are the two terms that we use. And what that means is that can drive, whether there's a partner relationship that maybe your firm, your health, as a healthcare provider, you have with, say, a particular relationship with a vendor, or something that you want to drive that spend or that experience with that consumer and take them over to, a Walgreens or a CVS, or if you have some other type of relationship with a provider, that is a great opportunity to do it, because they're not only looking at their phone and they're saying, okay, well, here's my payment, and then but also maybe have some advertisement around, hey, make sure you sign up for your next wellness exam or your next, fill in the blank exam. So it gives you that opportunity to push messaging to that consumer while you have them, because I promise you they're looking at that email and that link to get paid, but you also got their attention for X number of seconds to also engage them in some other ancillary opportunity or service. So we find with our customers, that's a great way to drive what I call spend back or win back. Meaning, like, if they left you and you wanted to get them back to the firm, it's a great way to do it. Or also spend back is to have some of those dollars be rerouted back to your firm through that opportunity. By the way, I was going to call out on the far right image, we do provide a check. If somebody wants a check, you do, for most providers out there, they do give the ability to, even though it's led with a virtual card, if they need to get a check for whatever reason, that is something that can be fulfilled through this process, for sure.
Yeah, it's a great point. So choice up front, and then, if you've made this selection, having choice to opt out and make a different decision, all part of the process, for sure.
Yeah. Great. So it's time for another poll question. This one's pretty short. Has your healthcare practice ever been the victim of check fraud? So we'll wait a few seconds for that. We've talked a little bit about it. I'd be curious to see what the experience has been from the audience perspective.
Alan, have you ever been a victim of check fraud?
I have not been a check fraud. I have been a victim of my bank account, but not a check. So yeah, it's nasty. And
I'm surprised. Yeah, I think it happens a lot. It happens a lot more than we think.
Yeah,
a lot of creative ways out there today.
And what's even worse is even in times of misery, like I was on the news this morning, they were talking about all of the scam, scenarios that are going on with Hurricane Ian. It's like every time the disaster, somebody wants to come behind and create something. So it's not good.
Sad, but true. Well, that's a big number.
Here are results. So 57% your firm has been a victim of check fraud.
More than half.
Not surprising. Unfortunately,
no.
Not surprising.
No, I think it's only getting bigger.
Yeah. Well, to that end, based on our results of our with AFP surveys, as you can see, Tony, if you'd like to speak a little bit about this.
Yeah, I think this is consistent with our poll question responses just now. The high risk of check fraud, checks, being the payment method today that's most susceptible to fraud. And that is just a continually growing trend. It's surprising, how big of a trend it really is. 74% in the study. This is based on a couple of years ago, but certainly a growing trend. 74% reported check fraud in one survey, and I think that aligns relatively closely with what we just saw in the poll question. Checks are just more susceptible to fraud than other forms of payment. Leading with digital solutions can help your organization reduce instances of payment fraud. There's just many more protections, many more solutions that can offer more visibility, more control over that payment. Whereas you lose quite a bit of control of that payment once you write that check and stick it in the mail, or have that checkbook laying around, et cetera, when you move toward that digital option. Just the visibility and the control, the capability to track and report increases, and that only helps us prevent and combat fraud. That number has decreased in 2021, only because honestly that decrease is due to the increased prevalence of electronic and digital payments. So we're seeing more and more solutions that are just combating that check fraud. Alan, anything else you want to add there?
It is something that it's like a race, right? And just finding ways to be able to offset against that. And we know that, like you said, that the check itself is a vehicle that's right for it right now. I do believe it's only a matter of time before they figure out something else based on even on some of these digital options. There is no foolproof method for sure, but it's trying to find ways to be much more secure in this process. So again, when you're looking at it, and it sounds like, or based on the responses of the audience members, it's real for you. And so finding ways to be able to mitigate it, not eliminate, I don't think you could ever eliminate it, but definitely to mitigate it. Thinking about leading with digital payments or putting that as a payment modality option in your arsenal, I think is a strong place for that with that. So having said that, in summary, we'll wrap this up and then we'll open it up for questions. We realize that in the industry, we've learned that there are significant challenges when you rely on those legacy payments like checks. Specifically today, we're talking about patient refunds. But again, they're creating those challenges for your organization, which we have seen. We just talked about fraud, but also administrative costs and the other elements that go into managing a disbursement system for those patient refunds. Based on our own surveys as well as the industry surveys that we have participated in and studied, our patients today expect convenience, they expect choice, and they expect speed. And they also, with that choice, they want to be able to choose for themselves how they get paid. That is something that we have learned overwhelmingly within the healthcare space, but also in other areas and verticals that we focus on. So it's easy. The solution is pretty easy. It's talking about adding to your payment modalities by offering that digital first payment solution, which kind of checks a few boxes. Number one, as it says on the screen, it gives a much better patient experience, or it can give a much better patient experience. And it can also help by hitting on some of those burdens or challenges that we just mentioned a second ago while you're going through that refund process. So again, it's one option that I would think that you might want to consider as you're kind of evaluating those payment modalities. Tony?
Yeah. So, it's not just about the refunds, about the patient refunds. I know we focused on that. OnBe, our company, we see, improvements here in terms of, the healthcare space, in terms of vaccine incentives, clinical trial payments. We do see, we support our clients and in other categories as well, including market research, consumer referral incentives, claims payments, incentives and rewards and appeasements. It's not just about the refunds category, but we do provide expertise in a variety of ways that payments are made across the healthcare space. So these are just some examples on the screen, something to think about.
Absolutely. So a little bit about OnBe, real quick. OnBe is short for On Behalf, and we really market ourselves as being a fintech provider that helps with not only the execution of the payment, but also with helping with that customer experience. We've had over 25 years experience doing that. We have a very broad global footprint, over 180 countries across multiple industries, as you can see on the screen, managing a throughput of over $8 billion in annual payments. We have a very high client retention rate, which we're extremely proud of, along with a high net promoter score, which we protect and track and try to improve every year. As I mentioned, we cover a lot of different programs, over 4,000 programs, and have it across 9 currencies with the ability to work in other currencies beyond through our FX solution process. So again, thank you this afternoon for the chance to talk a little bit about what we're seeing in the marketplace around refunds, and maybe a couple of thoughts that we may leave you with that. So to that, now it's time for questions. So I will turn it back to Rosalind.
Thank you to our speakers for that engaging presentation. And at this time, I'd like to invite those listening to enter your questions in the Q&A box located on your computer screens. And we'll take our first question now. What is the cost differential between digital payments versus paper checks? What is the best way to evaluate the cost benefit of doing more digital payments? We are a small practice that only issues about 50 to 100 refund checks a week, wondering how to assess if the cost of the digital platform would be worth it in terms of lessening fraud potential, etc.
Okay. Tony, you want to take it first? Or you want me to take it?
Go ahead, Alan.
Well, as a CPA, I would want to first look at the real cost.
That's why I asked you. Yeah, as a CPA.
I want to look at the real cost first. And I think it, again, you've got the tangible cost of the actual cutting of the check, right? The cost of the check, the ink, the paper, the postage. But I also look at the other components that go into looking at the ROI of really what it takes moving away from a check to a digital, right? It's things like we mentioned, escheatment. Did you know that in most states you've got to file up to 3 times a year the escheatment reports? You've got to get the letters out. You've got to make sure that it's just a lot of administrative burden that that firms, not only in healthcare, but across our space that they see. But also it's that void reissue. And then of course we talked about check fraud, the actual cost of the check fraud itself. So really, I think that all kind of goes into the soup of evaluating what it costs to manage a check program. The other piece that may be a little bit tougher for you, as you're based on the person asking the question, is what's the cost of that experience to that consumer of getting that check and that time, and is that something that your firm values in that space? Comparing that over to that cost of actually executing a digital. Virtual cards are virtually free. There's nothing to it. It's essentially the transmission of that number, right? And it's really more so around the elements behind it and offloading that cost of that service over to a provider. So they're definitely, on paper, you could see in my opinion, you could see a pretty easy way to sort of make that change over. But Tony, anything you'd like to add to that?
No, I think you made a great point about the overall cost. I think we looked at we estimate between $3 and $12 associated with the check cost. I think sometimes we take it for granted that it's just a piece of paper and I'm just writing out a check, and kind of forget that there's the postage, there's the lost stolen, there's the escheatment, there's all the administrative practices around that. And I think when we start talking to others in the industry, it sort of, the light goes on and says like, yeah, we have a lot of costs around this. And Alan, your point about digital, it's really, you're really lowering a lot of different, cost components through that digital channel. Just the speed and the immediacy alone, cutting out the paper process, cutting out, that mailing process, et cetera, alone is a huge cost savings.
Yeah.
Okay, our next question is, how do you handle concerns by the recipients to click on a link in an email? Mm-hmm. It's drilled into everyone not to do that because of potential hackers.
Yeah. So I totally get it. It's a great question. A lot of that comes from the focus and the emphasis that we put around the messaging, the branding, and then also just the overall experience in terms of having the ability to call and ask a question, to make sort of that link back to the provider that's familiar with them, right? And so that branding and engagement, and it's hard to kind of describe as we sit here today, but really we focus on just making sure that there's the familiar link back to your brand, and then really sort of engaging with that consumer to make sure that they understand that they are clicking on a safe link, and kind of taking it from there. I think that it's definitely a valid concern, but as we really focus on that digital engagement component, I think we see a lot of trust out there with the payments that we deliver. Alan, anything you want to add there?
I would also say, Tony, that I know that a lot of providers that I've both have worked with professionally as well as personally now have portals, right? And so it is a lot about that awareness and that communication of the communication through the portal. So it may not be an email link that sends the payment. It right. could be a case where you take that digital payment and actually deposit it within your portal. So it could have that extra layer of safety and security with it. So that's one of the beauties of having a digital first payment option, is that you have some flexibility. I mean, you could even send it via text message. I mean, there's multiple options that you have out there from the communication and the delivery of that actual payment that could make it a little bit more secure. So thank you for that question.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to our next question. Do you see an emerging area of interest for non-traditional payment methods?
Non-traditional.
So non-traditional meaning more in the Venmo world or Zelle world, etc. I don't know if they can add to it here, but I think that's kind of where I view the non-traditional. Yes, I would say honestly, Alan, in the last year or so, 6 months to a year, that movement has really started to occur. And I don't necessarily know what's all driving it, but we are seeing more and more, kind of peer-to-peer mobile wallet type solutions that are out there as more and more consumers are just in their everyday lives exchanging money via, just these wallets, right? And the trust is growing there. So that non-traditional type payment method is definitely taking off quite a bit this year alone. I think I remember seeing a big jump just in the last few months.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too. And I was wondering too about crypto. And I know that that's starting to get some attraction. I mean, even my local church is now accepting crypto for gifts. So I thought that was interesting. I don't know that I would see it in necessarily the healthcare space, that you would be paying out refunds in crypto, but it's definitely something we talk about. And outside of the healthcare arena, there are some customers that are interested in exploring that, along with PayPal, Venmo, Zelle, even RTP, and some of the other other payment modalities out there. So thank you.
Those non-traditional methods are what I think are driving the expectation of that immediacy. It's just become too easy. So, yeah.
All righty. Our next question. How many days does it take for patients receiving the patient refunds or claim payment through OnBe?
So it can be, go ahead, Alan.
I was going to say it's pretty fast. If you're leading with a virtual card, I mean, as soon as that file is transferred to us, I mean, it's as quick as getting an email out to you and receiving the email. I mean, it's pretty fast.
Instant, yeah. Same day. So very quick. Once we've received the request, as Alan pointed out, whether it's through some sort of technological integration, if that's the path you want to take, versus a file that's sent to us, etc. Once we're processing that payment can be delivered instantly.
And it's good funds, right? So they can immediately provision it to a wallet. They can use it. They can move it to their bank account. I mean, it's by that time they're cooking with gas, as we like to say.
Okay, let's see. Do we have any other ones? We are aligned with, and this might be a comment. We are aligned with a local bank to have prepaid debit cards issued to our patients instead of us cutting refund checks. Our elderly population does not like this. It's a big disaster for our elderly patients. So that was a comment there. Let's see.
I'd like to learn more about that, frankly, and maybe that's something they could put in the chat, because it's a lot of it. I mean, it could be a couple of different things, right? It could be, is it a virtual card? Is it a physical card? Was the awareness created beforehand? How was it received? I mean, there's a lot of variables that go into that. But I definitely have heard that before as an option. But generally speaking, it's as we mentioned earlier, it's becoming more widely accepted is from a payment vehicle perspective. Tony, anything else you'd like to add to that one?
No, I agree. I think we've definitely seen that in our industry. But honestly, the adoption and the familiarity is continuing to grow. And a lot of it does come down to how it's delivered, how it's communicated, the benefits of et cetera, and that's one of the things that OnBe helps with quite a bit as a program managed solution is, we're helping you, with that education and with those pain points to make it as frictionless as possible.
Okay, we have another question. Do you see checks or ACH being a thing of the past? And if so, when?
Well, I thought by now checks would be a thing of the past, but there's a lot of checks still out there, and we're still sort of, helping to, to make that digital conversion. I think ACH is probably not going anywhere anytime. It's definitely not going anywhere anytime soon. In fact, it's evolving. A company like ours, we're constantly evolving how we support ACH. ACH has, gone from a 3 to 5 day type window down to, being able to deliver an ACH payment same day across multiple windows per day. You're seeing the evolution of various, ways that, spins on ACH, making it more and more instant with different networks that are sort of, taking a, page from the ACH book and evolving it further and further between banks. So I think ACH is sticking around for a long time. The concepts, the bank-to-bank transfers will be there for a long time. And honestly, it's hard to say when checks will be gone, but it's I think they're here to stay for a while. But certainly, an administrative burden that I think a lot of companies and businesses are looking to get rid of. So, Alan, anything else to add there?
I agree with you. And I think, as I was told several years ago, business tends to go 30 to 40 years behind where the consumer goes. And so, we as a consumer, society, we've embraced digital experiences. And I think it's just a matter of time before we'll see checks truly become a thing of the past. Back in the old days, it was more of an audit type feature, right? To make sure you had that attached to an invoice and receipt of goods. And now, with electronic ways to show that acceptance and matching, without having to have a physical paper anymore. So again, I think that over time we will see it. But I echo, Tony, what you're saying about ACH. I think that push and that pull of the money in between the banking system is getting enhanced and embraced, and ways to find faster ways to do it. And it's just another element. We just mentioned RTP. It's another derivation, if you will, or another, a variation of that as well. So again, I think it's something that's continuing to evolve.
Brady, and I think we have time for one more question. How do you deal with unclaimed property if the virtual refund isn't used? Or, what happens if the patient doesn't take action?
A couple of options. A typical setup is to, once over that time, when the funds are not used, there's a process that you can actually go through depending upon, the funds and the state that you're in. But ultimately, there's some opportunities to either default from a virtual card to a physical card, and be able to make that available to them if for some reason the email was lost or we needed to be reissued or something like that. So there's a couple of different sort of steps that can be taken to make sure that those funds are made available to the patient before you actually have to file it, if you will, with the respective state. So it's not just a one and done with an email, the virtual number, and then you're done. There's a couple of things that can be done as well. Tony?
Yeah, and we're taking care of that reporting back to the state. So that's one of the things that we emphasize through all the solutions that we provide. Are those state by state rules and regulations around how that unclaimed property is reported back and managed. And there's lots of different ways to support that. And we've built proprietary solutions internally to handle that reporting and take that off of our clients' plates. That's actually one of the bigger components or sellers of the solutions that we provide is handling those components alone.
Well, great. Lots of good questions. Well, with that, we have reached the conclusion of today's webinar. I'd like to thank our speakers for presenting and OnBeat for sponsoring. We hope that you have found the presentation informative. Thank you for your participation and have a great day.